Hey guys, and welcome back to another Free Plugin Friday where we look at free plugins you can use in your own productions. Now, today we are looking at a plugin company that is just very new to the scene, and I actually got an email from them, and that's Kiive Audio. So they sent me an email saying, I've seen your Free Plugin Friday, here is some plugins we're going to be releasing. One of them is free, which is the one we're looking at today, and some other plugins. So I'm actually going to do a few reviews of their other plugins. And I said to them, as I say to any company that talks to me, is despite whatever, if I get any benefit from this, I just got some kind of test licenses for their plugins. I'm going to be completely transparent. Doesn't change my opinion. I give my full opinion on plugins from what I think they are, despite whether a company's contact me or I found the plugin myself or I've bought it. It doesn't make any difference, and I make that clear to any company that wants to work with me, because there's no point in doing these YouTube reviews if I'm biased based on, some affiliation with the company. And today we're going to look at Warmy EP1A, which is their free plugin, which is amazing that it's free, because it is a Pultec EQP1A tube EQ. Now, there are some other free ones on the market, like the Analog Session one, Analog Obsession, but then there's a lot of paid ones as well, and it's a very, very popular kind of EQ circuit. There's been remakes of the EQ circuit. It's very expensive because it is tube-based. I think it's passive with a tube kind of preampy side to it. Let's just dive straight in. You don't want to hear me talk about it the whole time, and have a look at the features. I'll talk about them, then we'll do some sounds. So if you're not familiar with the Pultec style EQ, it is a little bit different to your normal kind of digital EQ or EQs you might be used to, in that it has a boost and a cut instead of a single knob that boosts and cut. Now you may think, well, what's the point of that? Well, what's really interesting, and it's known as the Pultec trick, is boosting and cutting has different curves. So even though you boost and cut at the same frequency with the bass, for example, we'll get to the high end later. It's a little bit more different and more interesting there. If you boost and cut at the same time, you aren't actually getting a flat frequency response. You are getting a change in frequency. I'll try and link some videos below. There's a lot of stuff on the Pultec trick. I may do my own video on the Pultec trick. Yeah, it gives two different curves together, which gives you this interesting kind of new curve. It's like either you're boosting or cutting, but with a slightly different curve than you would just boosting and cutting, and it gives this, certain sound. It generally hollows out some of the mid-range to bring you some of the low ends. It's generally what it sounds like on the low end side. And the same is here for the high end, but you have changeable frequencies. So let's go through all the controls and I'll talk about them. So you have boost and cut here. This is the low frequency side. You got the boost. It goes up to 10 dB. You've got the cut. So like I said, you use them in conjunction, and you have frequencies to choose from. Now, I believe this has way more frequencies than the original Pultec. I think they've added some in-between frequencies and extended the range, which is great because it's a digital product. Why not give us more, considering, in the analog world, it would cost you more to add more, but in the digital world, you could probably quite easily add more frequencies. So we've got 20, 30, 60, 100, 200, 400, and 800. So it goes all the way up into that kind of lower mid-range, which could be very useful. We'll check that out. So that's the low frequency section. And you have the high frequency section. Before we go into high frequency section, you also have this bandwidth, and I think that affects the cut controls. I'm not sure if it affects the boost. It doesn't affect the low end boost, but it's for the high end. So it might affect the boost as well, but it's basically a bandwidth. So we'll have a look at how that sounds different as well. So that's the kind of global bandwidth, but I think it's mainly for the high frequency. We have a boost control here, which is the same as the boost here, 0 to 10. We have the cut control 0 to 10, and then we've got the two different frequency bands. Now, these have been extended as well, which is great. So now you have boost frequency 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, and 16 kilohertz. And the cut frequency 3, 4, 5, 10, and 20. Now, I believe the original Pultec was only 5, 10, and 20, which for most things was great, but sometimes you want to cut some of that mid-range and boost, like, for example, 3 here and boost to 16. We'll be looking at some of that too. So having those extra frequencies is great. Now, for the extra features down here, there's some really useful stuff. For one, you have input and output controls, and this is very important when it comes to this mix control, because this mix control is actually the harmonic distortion you get from the tubes. So you turn that up and you're getting more and more distortion. Now, I think the circuit is after this passive circuit here in order to bring the gain back up in the hardware unit. So actually driving this kind of distortion circuit with the boosts in here and cutting and stuff actually forms different kinds of distortion, which is really, really cool as well. You have oversampling, and this is something that so many companies, big expensive companies, have not included, and that's oversampling. And when you're talking about distortion and you're talking about high frequencies, like this has, 20 dB cut and 16 dB boost, if you're boosting up in the high frequencies into distortion, aliasing can be a problem. So having oversampling is great, and like I said, it goes up to 16 times. It doesn't seem to kind of wreck my CPU too much. I am using a lot of plugins in this session, so there is a lot of CPU usage. And then you'll have presets, which is great. There's some factory presets, there's some user presets, which is always great. A lot of plugins don't have presets for whatever reason. And an undo redo, which is really useful because sometimes you make changes and you're like, oh, I hate that. And recalling it in a plugin isn't often work, especially in something like Cubase. I don't know if other DAWs allow you to do that, but in Cubase, if you've changed it, unless you've saved it or taken a snapshot. I think you can take, snapshots and stuff. But yeah, basically there. And then here you can change the size, which is really, really useful. 50, 70. So, if you've got whatever kind of screen you've got the size, and it looks like a very high definition kind of visual. It's great. My only thing is this ripple is cool, but it kind of is a little bit bright around here, but I can read everything completely fine. The only other thing is there's an EQ bypass and there's a bypass. Now, if you bypass just the EQ, I'm pretty sure this circuit stays in, whereas if you bypass the whole plugin, it bypasses the whole plugin. So I've got it on this dance track. We've got it on the stereo bus. Let's go through some of the kind of controls and I'll kind of show how it sounds, what it's doing. So I'm just going to loop this end section here, which is kind of the drop section. Let's just bypass it so you can hear what it sounds like. I'm going to zero out all the controls so we can just hear what this circuit's doing in here. So it's on now, with everything controls all the way doing nothing. So dial in the distortion circuit. You can hear it pumping and compressing there, that distortion. Sounds a lot like tubes. It does have this compression element to it. Now, I don't know if that's in the hardware. I've never actually used the hardware. And most of the software I've used doesn't have any controllability of the THC. So it's actually pretty cool. And of course, you can give yourself more headroom using these input. Because we've got it on the stereo bus, we're going to do that. Make sure the level is similar. Adds a little bit of level there just because it's distorting, I'm guessing. A bit more harmonics. Yeah. So you just got to watch that. So we might mix off to 0 now and check the controls. So we'll start off with boost. We're gonna, I'm hoping we don't run out of headroom here because we're gonna get a lot of boost. So let's boost it up and listen to the different frequencies. Start down at 20. So that's the really low thumpy stuff, and that's what this kind of plug-in is really good for. I love that kind of, that fat kind of subby sound. It's kind of more your fatter bass. 100. 200. Have a look at the same frequencies with the cut. So no cut, obviously. we're going to use them in together. So my favorite thing to do is add kind of sub but not make it too muddy. So we're adding that sub, right? Let's bring that cut at the same. Maybe a bit more cut. So bypass. I'm going to turn the volume up a little bit as we're not going as hard now. Okay, unbypass. You can hear that sub. Now if we turn this frequency up to something a bit more obvious, maybe 60, which is really in that bass, you can hear that mid-range cut going on, right? No cut. No boost. It's really changing those frequencies in the low ends. Maybe back the boost up a little bit. Let's go to, 200. It's where you're going to get it really obvious. So if we pull them all the way up. No cut. Really changing the mid-range now. That lower mid-range, completely different character. Obviously boosting, but not as much as you would if you're not using the cut. So like I said, it's very much using the combination of the boost and cut is how I use it, and a lot of other people use it. Of course, you can just use the boost and the cut. They're very nice curves. They do very nice things. But this is what other EQs don't have in the same kind of way, is these two different curves that work together. My favorite, is definitely 20, 30, and 60, depending on the instrument. Kicks, 20 and 30 is really nice, and we are going to use it on the kick here in a minute just to show you that. So let's have a look at the high boost frequencies and the bandwidth control as well. So let's start off with the bandwidth control, I think. So I'm just going to boost it, keep it at 8K. And we'll just change this bandwidth. Way more focused Q there. As we turn it up, that Q is getting quieter. More and more high frequencies. So that is very useful. I mean, Qs are on plugins everywhere, but it is very useful depending on what you want to target. And that's where it comes in. And we are going to be targeting some stuff when we kind of use it on individual instruments. So let's just go through the frequencies again with the boost and cut. We're going to keep it on sharp so you can really hear those frequencies. So let's just boost it up all the way. Bring it down to 3. Okay, let's have a look at the cut now. I'm pretty sure the cut is a shelf. So yeah, I do believe the cut is a shelf, where the cut here I don't think is a shelf at all. So let's now look at using it together. So what I'm going to do is the same as I did for the low end, use them together, but we're going to go through different frequencies. So let's start off with, you've got it the same frequency. So let's just choose 10 because 10's kind of an easy one. It's the air, and kind of hear what it does. So let's boost it up first and then cut by the same amount. So because it's a shelf, we're going to be cutting some of that high end, right? But what it does, it changes that kind of frequency around there. So you've got more high frequencies, but you also don't have more high frequencies. If that makes sense. It just changes where they're targeted. And you can really hear it kind of changes the perception of that mid-range. Let's move it to broad. Slightly changes the harshness there. So let's bring it down to 3. They're going to be way more obvious kind of mid-range stuff going on. And let's just go extreme. So obviously if we're doing this at 3, we're cutting all the frequencies above 3. So it's getting a bit dark. Let's bring it back a bit. Bring it back. So where the power comes in for me for this is boosting other frequencies and cutting different frequencies. So maybe we do a cut all the high end down to 3, but then boost up 8 or 10K, and then you've kind of got this dip in that mid-range. It comes up and then comes down again. So let's try that. Maybe we choose 5K, slight cut, and boost up at 10. Maybe a bit narrower. Actually, let's try 4. So if we go down to 3 now, it's that mid-range dip. So what we're doing is increasing the kind of top end, but still cutting some of it, really changing like just an interesting curve. So if we got rid of the cut, it can be a bit harsh, right? But without it, it's a little bit nasal. There isn't as much kind of niceness in the top end. If we went really sharp, you could pinpoint some frequencies. Let's just do the really airy stuff. Maybe we try 10. Maybe 12 here. Really changing the cymbals and the claps without changing anything below it, really. So what we might do now is I'm going to do a similar thing across both of them, and we're going to add the distortion in, and so you can kind of hear what it's going to sound like on a track when you're actually dialing it in, say using it for mastering. Then we're going to look at some individual sources, because if you get really aggressive with it on individual sources, you can get some really cool sounds. So let's just dial in some more low end, more thump, maybe 30. Cut a bit of it though. Some of this distortion. Okay, let's make sure we volume compensate. It'd be nice if there was automatic volume compensation. That'd be actually really cool. So we've made it a much more hyped mix. It's kind of like loudness control on. It's a bit over the top, but you can kind of hear what we're doing. A little bit scoops, so maybe bring back this boost a little bit. Maybe bring back in frequency. So I'm going to leave that there for the stereo. You can hear how you can kind of dial it in and change the kind of mid-range, change what's going on in the high end. Like I said, there is a kind of interesting curve thing going on there. Now, some people might find it annoying that you don't know what's going on. What could be really cool for some of these plugins, and I don't know if anyone wants to do it because then it's not really a Pultec trick. You can actually see what's going on. But an actual visualizer that shows the EQ curve going on. I'd just be really interested in that. And I haven't seen anyone do it for this kind of Pultec EQ. They always just giving it that kind of analog look, which I'm fine with the analog thing, but some actual digital kind of representation as well would be really, really cool. So for anyone looking at it in Kiive audio, if you're watching this and that's something you could implement pretty easily, I'm not sure, I'm not a programmer, that would be a cool feature. So now we're going to dive in on individual sources. I'm just going to check, did I turn that off? I'm going to turn it off. So this is kind of where you get more aggressive with it, and generally low-end sources are where I like it, or really kind of percussive stuff. That's where I really like this kind of EQ. Though the high-end can sound nice on stuff like pianos and that as well. But we're going to start off with drums and just put it on the drum track, and I can show you what we can do. Got these kind of housey drums. So I've set this up before. So I'll bypass it with this, it's a lot easier actually. So kind of on the low end side, if I just turn everything off except the kick. Listen to how the kick's changed a fair bit. Way more thump in the low end, possibly a little bit too much. We could dial it back a little bit. Less kind of thin paperiness, a little bit more depth to it. And a lot of that's distortion. If we turn this up, you'll hear it actually distorting, right? Because we're boosting into it. I'll just show you, you're boosting into that distortion. But we don't want a distorted kick. We just want a little bit of that kind of fatness. And I've turned it all the way off now. You can hear that it's not as fat, right? Really kind of thicken that up. It's a little bit too much. I mean, we could try another frequency. Yeah, a lot of that sound is actually coming from the tube distortion, which is really cool. So let's just go back to all the drums and just listen to the cymbal. I'm going to take the kicks out so you can hear the cymbals and the clap. Off. Not as together. A lot of this is the tube compression kind of working, which is really, really fun. But we're going really extreme. Full boost, full cut at 10. So if we dial it back a bit, just giving a little bit more presence, a little bit more kind of niceness up there. And making the claps kind of sit better together because there's two different clap tracks. Almost sounds like they're pitched up a little bit because you've kind of emphasized different frequencies. So put the kick back in. It just kind of melds it together really well. So it's really good for that usage. And I've also used it on a bass here. So let's have a listen to this bass. Now this is a fairly aggressive bass and you can make it even more aggressive. It's called growl bass. So this is what it sounds like by itself without the Warmy EQ. This is two different basses driven into a group. Fine, but we're just using tube EQ here, Warmy here, to kind of give a bit more aggression in the mid-range. And that's what's really cool about having these lower frequencies you can control on this Kiive version that you couldn't on the normal Pultec. It's all mid-range stuff. So we're boosting this 4K. I mean, 4K. But we're cutting some 5K and up just to kind of control it because we don't need too much high end on our bass sound. So you can hear there's a lot of high end there, especially once we've boosted this. So we'll just bring that down a little bit. And then low end wise, it's all this kind of 200 here. So turn that off. Just boost it to 3. Add a little bit of cut just so it's a bit more controlled. And the last thing is obviously the distortion. No distortion. Full distortion. Can be a little bit muddy with that much, so I dialed it back to about here. Again, off. Back on. With the drums. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them both off and turn them both on for the drums and bass, and you can hear the differences. Off. Back on. So bass and drums is usually what I use in a Pultec style EQ4, but let's chuck it on the vocals we have in this track. They're kind of very heavily processed multi-track vocals. Let me just go find the vocal group here, but we're just going to grab them and stick it on there and see what we can kind of do. If we want to add more high end, just change a little bit.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
I'm just going to loop a whole section.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work
What I might do is route the reverb to the vocal group as well.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out. Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
So maybe we want to change some of the high end.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
Let's find frequencies we don't like as much, maybe.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
Maybe give it a little bit more high end boost, right?
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out. Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
Change that mid range a little bit.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out. Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
Hyped it up a little bit, but it hasn't really got harsh.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can
Go a bit
work
sharper.
it out.
Maybe we stick in the middle. And let's see if we can cut
Baby,
some of
what you
that.
thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
Thin some of this out a little bit, maybe.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
But bring in a little bit of low end.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out. Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
I don't want to make it too bass heavy, but I kind of just want to get it thick but not as
Baby, we
muddy.
can work it out.
Change the oversampling to 2.
Baby, what you
Two's a good
thinking?
kind of
Baby, we
middle
can
ground.
work it out.
See if some of this distortion makes it sound nice.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
It's obviously too extreme, especially with the reverb. Let's just add a little bit.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can
Maybe
work it
take the
out.
input down, it's not hitting us harder.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
Pretty subtle.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work it out.
Off.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work
Yeah, it's just
it
a little bit more
out.
airy, I think. It's very cool there.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we
If you
can
want more
work
mid-range,
it
we can bring that
out.
frequency up. We could probably bring this frequency up.
Baby, what you thinking? Baby, we can work what you're thinking. Maybe we can work it out. Baby, what you're thinking. Maybe we can work it out.
See, now it sounds, with the bypass, it sounds kind of nasal, like there's this little nasal tone going on.
Maybe we can work it out.
Kind of remove that.
Baby, what you're thinking.
In the mix for this section.
We can work it out. Baby, what you're thinking. Maybe we can work
I'll turn it off.
Baby, what you're thinking. Maybe we can work it out. Baby, what you're thinking. Maybe we can work
Yeah, it sounds a little kind of, doesn't have enough high end, doesn't have enough something going on. Switch it back on. Now on this one. Sounds a little bit wider too, which is really cool. If we drive it up even more, maybe. I want to hear what it sounds like at 100. 200 is better. Again, that distortion adds a little bit of glue too, which is really nice. It's what you want from these kind of analog style plugins. Now let's listen to all of them together again. So we had the drums, we had this bass, and we had the vocals. So this is without Warmy, and with it on all those sources. Again, bypassed. This is bypass, like I said. And as we come back around, I'll turn it back on. It might be too heavy-handed on the bass, maybe. Bypass it again, just for one little section. And bring it back in. Okay, so I'm going to load up another song. We're just going to listen to it on some more kind of traditional rock style stuff. Again, like I said, long review. But I think it's worth kind of seeing on different sources because you might not be working on the same kind of music I am. And the more sources you hear, the more kind of gives you an idea of if it will work for you. So first up, let's listen to it on the drum bus, dial in a little bit more oomph. I like to kind of get more low end oomph, a little bit more kind of clarity in the high end using something like this on the drum bus. So we're just going to solo the drums. Just dial in that low end. What we might do first is dial in some distortion. A little bit. Bring that output back to match. Already the distortion does a little bit of fattening, which is nice. Low end. Let's do 30. You can hear that 30 starts to affect the snare a bit, but that's what the cut control's for. It's a lot more thump in the low end. It's cool. Now let's give the high end a little bit. I don't know, it needs something. You can really hear that change in the mid-range, right? It's because we're basically scooping it by boosting the top end and the low end. Back on. That's cool. Let's listen to it on the mix. On the drums, we're going to bypass first. Those guitars are a bit loud, so I'm just going to turn them down. Cut through a lot better. Getting lost in the mid-range otherwise. Those strings are way too loud, but anyway, this isn't a mixing tutorial. Okay, let's look at the bass. Like I said, this bass sounds pretty terrible. I've got a little bit of compression on it, but we're just gonna add Warmy. It's really kind of sculpted. Let's get a bit of drive out of it. Well, that's kind of that Ampeg kind of scoop sound there. Well, it's a bit more mid-range there, right? Kind of sounds pathetic now without it. With the drums. Let's fix that volume difference. Yeah, a bit pathetic. Punchy. Whole mix. Bypass both of them. So they're both bypassed. Put the bass one back on. And the drums. Might be a bit too much low end here, but dial it back a bit. So that's been Warmy EP1A, a very long kind of plugin review, but I wanted to go through, a kind of a lot of features and different sources and such. So far, great plugin. The compression on the distortion gets a bit much. I wonder if there can be better kind of volume compensation there. It kind of gets really quiet, gets kind of messy, and kind of volume compensation in general would be really cool. I know pretty much no other Pultec EQ has it, so there's no competition that's doing it better. But I think being a newer plugin than a lot of those, it would be really cool. But again, it is free. But they do have paid plugins that are kind of very, very similar in their features. So if that's something they could implement, some kind of analyzer or something, that'd be really cool. Again, not going to be on the original hardware, so not really the point. As far as how Pultec-y is it, I've never used an actual Pultec, and being old and tube, all of them are going to have drifting components and sound a bit different anyway. But it does the kind of Pultec thing I like, with a few extra features of having more frequencies. I may do a bigger shootout between all the Pultec EQs I have access to. There's a few free ones, and I've got, I think, the Waves one maybe, just to kind of compare them. But this does have more frequencies than most of the others I've got, I think. So that is really cool to have, and the distortion features really cool. Oversampling, awesome. As I said earlier, everyone should have oversampling. I know some programmers, coders say that you can have a lot of problems with oversampling. There can be issues. I know Analog Obsession had a few plugins that had problems with oversampling, so they took it away, redid the algorithm, then put it back up. I do just wonder if they could, kind of license out whatever the oversampling algorithms are. From kind of proven ones, if it is so much trouble, especially for someone like Waves or Isotope or Slate, who have huge teams. I mean, Slate's a bit smaller, but you get the point. They're kind of big companies. They still don't have oversampling. Like, surely they could figure it out if a bunch of kind of free plugin and small manufacturers can. So again, love the oversampling. It just ensures that you don't get aliasing distortion, because if we're getting analog gear, if that's what we want the sound of, well, there shouldn't be aliasing involved. So anyway, that's the Kiive Audio Tube EQ. I had a few little gripes, but they weren't really major gripes. This is really the kind of distortion with that compression thing. Otherwise, very easy to use. Comes with a whole bunch of features I don't have in my other plugins. So go check it out. I'm going to be doing more Kiive Audio plugins, hopefully this week, and a few other things. So check out them when they come out. Check out the website. Also, check out all the other free plugin Fridays. I'm trying to get them every Friday. Sometimes I've missed them. We're going to try and do a makeup for the missed ones with a bit of a kind of free plugin week kind of deal. More coming on that. I've got to actually sit down and do all the videos, edit them all together, so I'm not sure when it's coming out. As always, please like and subscribe. Last time I checked, we were 2,500 subscribers, which is amazing. So thanks to all the people that are subscribed, to all of you that are watching. Please subscribe for more videos, and I will see you next time.